Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to rumble!
Greetings and shalom. I'm George Lujack of Scripture Truth Ministries. I engaged in a debate and discussion with King Crocoduck and the hosts of Non Sequitur Show, Steve McRae and Kyle Curtis, on June 28th, 2018. I'm an old Earth creationist with many young Earth creationist positions. We at Scripture Truth Ministries believe that the Earth and universe were created in the beginning, billions of years ago. The Earth was created without form to sustain life and void of life, and remained without form and void until about 6,000 years ago, when God created all life upon the Earth, including the dinosaurs. We furthermore reject atheistic Darwinian evolution as false, based on scripture, science, logic, and reason. At the end of the debate, we get into a discussion on beneficial mutation. King Crocoduck and the non sequitur hosts bring up the case of Richard Sandrak, claiming this kid had some kind of original human genetic mutation of extreme muscular strength. After the debate ended, I further investigated the claims made and the story of this person and saw his adult photos, which did not indicate a super strength, super muscular man. I confirmed that he was force trained by his father at a very young age and was allegedly given steroids to enhance his strength in his early childhood days, which he did not continue with into adulthood after he was separated from his father as a result of his parents' divorce. As for the term beneficial mutation, it is more scientifically accurate to call it genetic variation, which is variations of features within gene pools. All creatures, including humans, have within them genes which have a range of limited variation and ability, some of which may lay dormant until needed and stimulated by the right environmental factors, and can become dominant thereafter by any kind and any species by means of survival of the fittest and natural selection. Genetic variation causes speciation. Genetic variation is not beneficial genetic mutation in the sense that some new beneficial feature is added or acquired by a creature, which can then make the creature transition into a different kind of creature. The tactic of atheistic Darwinian evolutionists that is used to con people is first getting them to believe that man has beneficially mutated through evolution processes, then get people to believe we beneficially mutated and evolved from monkeys. After they hook people with that bait, they then push them further to try to get them to believe that humans and all life descended from a common ancestor, the first self-sustaining, self-replicating, single-celled organisms which somehow sprang into life from inorganic elements. During the debate, you will hear the Scripture Truth Ministries Abiogenesis challenge. Atheistic Darwinian evolutionists don't like to speak about abiogenesis because they have no viable answers for how life could have possibly started without a God, yet maintain that there is no God. Abiogenesis is necessary if there is no God, but the evolution con men will keep telling you that abiogenesis is not evolution and will ask you to have faith that science will one day discover how nature created life without God. This Scripture Truth Ministries Abiogenesis challenge remains open and proclaims that all atheists will one day know a universal truth. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and God created all life that is upon the earth. This will conclude my introduction. I hope you enjoy the discussion.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Non Sequitur. Good to have you with us today. I'm Kyle Curtis. Steve McRae is on actually that side today. Hello, Steve.
I'm over here.
How are we today?
Doing
Everything
awesome.
good?
Everything's great.
Good. Cool. Are you walking through the snow?
I mean,
Oh, okay.
no, definitely not what I
Well,
mean.
anyways, today we have two guests that are coming actually back to the show. King Crocoduck has been with us twice before, and we are extremely happy to have him back. Hello, Your Majesty.
Hi, how's it going?
Excellent. It's good to have you back. And also returning is George Lujack. George joined us about 2 weeks ago with a discussion with Aaron Ra that turned into Godless Engineer and Cy Gart. And welcome back to you, George.
Thank you. About a week ago, actually.
It seems, well, I have to be honest with you. It seems with some of the streams we do, it seems a lot longer than that. We got through a streak of doing 3 Flat Earth videos back to back to back, and they tend to take it out of you, especially the one with Sungenis and Antonio. That was something. But anyway, welcome back, George. I liked the video that you did in response to us, especially that you gave me a pink arrow. That was the highlight of my week. So well played. Well played.
Well, I didn't find a rainbow one, but that's fine.
That's okay.
That
Next
was my
time,
suggestion.
hey, maybe after
I'm the one that said it should have been a rainbow, didn't I? Not though.
maybe after this one, maybe after this discussion, I'll email you one
Okay.
just so you'll be prepared for that next time.
I'll adjust
Okay,
it.
cool. We want to originally with Rick Delano. He was going to be with us tonight. We want to extend another heartfelt recovery for him. As far as I know, he is still in the hospital, and we had a good time, especially Steve. Steve really enjoyed chatting with him the last time he was on here.
I did. I actually
so,
did. It was
yeah.
really pretty nice. It started off that way, but kind of ended up that way. And actually, it was a pleasant conversation.
Yeah. So we wish him well. And Rick, if you're watching, hurry up and get better, and we'll bring you back on as soon as you're able. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into it then. Steve, you want to introduce these fine gentlemen and then get the ball rolling?
Yeah, sure. Tonight we got King Crocoduck and George Lujack. As you guys remember, George Lujack was with us. Well, it was only a week ago, but as Kyle said, with all the shows that we have in between, it seems quite a long time ago as compared to just being a week. But anyways, George is a old Earth creationist that kind of has a lot of young Earth creationist arguments, but he calls himself a young old Earth creationist. And King Crocoduck is more of a evolutionist and Big Bang cosmology person. So we have brought them back to have a kind of a conversation between the two in a format kind of style that Kyle will talk about here in a second. But let them introduce themselves if you're not familiar with them. King Crocoduck, go ahead and introduce yourself. People don't know who you are, which, by the way, I don't know who that would be, but just in case there are any left, go ahead and tell them about yourself, your channel, and your position.
Well, hi, I'm King Crocoduck. I run a YouTube channel where I teach science and debunk pseudoscience. My background is in physics, and I've done research in several areas of physics, but basically my main area is in computational biophysics, where I investigate nonlinear signal spreading through biophysical systems, in particular the brain. Which is just a fancy way of saying that I apply chaos theory and nonlinear dynamics to biological systems. Yeah, I like evolution. I like the Big Bang. I like good science, and I like good philosophy of science. That's sort of my spiel. That's what I talk about on my YouTube. And if you're interested in that, check it out.
All right, George,
Also
welcome
follow him on
back. Like I
Twitter.
said, yeah, on Twitter. Yeah, he's on Twitter. George,
He's funny.
welcome back. Like I said, it's been a whole week since you've been here. Does seem a lot longer though. But go ahead and tell us about yourself and your position.
I'm George Lujack. I'm a retired New York City police officer. I am retired, not fired. I worked over 20 years there, and I worked as an international police officer in the former Yugoslav republics of Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina and Serbia. And I founded Scripture Truth Ministries with Mrs. Julie Borick, and I have a website, scripturetruthministries.com. I'm author of a book, Mysteries of the Scriptures Revealed. And we have a YouTube channel, Scripture Truth Ministries. And you can find us on Facebook and MeWe as well.
Okay, awesome. All right. So what we'll do is, George, we'll let you start out with your opening statement, whatever you want to say on the position. And then we'll go over to King Crocoduck, and then we'll do the rebuttal rounds after those two. So whenever you're ready, George.
All right. All right. Abiogenesis to Darwinian evolution is not a scientific fact. A scientific fact is an objective and verifiable observation, in contrast with a hypothesis or theory, which is intended to explain or interpret facts. Atheistic Darwinian evolution is a wild misinterpretation of some science facts based on many unsupported assumptions and on a premise that there is no God. I am not against science, but I am against science fiction and refutable science theory presented as science fact. I'm calling out atheists for their selective use of straw man and non sequitur, labeling as biased and hypocritical. A believer in God, the Creator, proclaims that without evidence, he sees no reason to believe in a godless creation of the heavens and the earth, and in abiogenesis to Darwinian evolution. He therefore concludes faith in God based on observable science and reasoned faith of the scriptures. The atheist, on the other hand, refuses to acknowledge the lack of evidence for a godless creation and instead proclaims lack of evidence for God. Therefore, the atheist shouting straw man and non sequitur to those who believe in God the Creator through reasoned faith are hypocrites, as they also should be shouting straw man and non sequitur every time a Darwinian evolutionist makes a fallacious, non-verifiable scientific argument. Another straw man, non sequitur argument about God is that the onus is upon believers to prove that God exists, and if they cannot, then belief in God is non-scientific and is therefore dismissible as a fairy tale. The real fairy tale is that frogs over billions of years can become humans. We as believers do have proof that God exists. He gave us his proofs in the Holy Scriptures, which, yes, can be used as proof of him, that proclaims the man, Yeshua Messiah, Jesus Christ, walked among us and demonstrated that he possessed the power of a supernatural God, not limited to the laws of nature, which nature itself is. Yeshua, Jesus, supernaturally turned 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread into enough food to serve 5,000 people, and he healed lepers, cured the blind, raised people from the dead, walked on water, and raised himself from the grave. God will reveal himself to the world for all to see at the appointed time of his choosing. Until then, he is testing the people of the world to see who will believe in him through reasoned faith and will live accordingly by his commandments. God never did expect anyone to blindly believe in him, or the scriptures could never have declared the following. Isaiah 1 verse 18, "Come now and let us reason together, says Yahweh the Lord." Compare the reasoned faith God asks us to believe by him with atheism. Atheism asks you to have Pinocchio faith, to believe that a wooden puppet boy can become a real boy if given enough time. In atheism, they ask you to believe that molecules can arrange themselves into the first self-supporting, self-replicating single-cell life forms. Then, over billions of years, those single-cell life forms can acquire new genetic code information through natural selection and random beneficial mutation and advance into all the various life kinds on Earth, including mankind. Beneficial mutation has never been shown to occur in nature. Only detrimental, non-beneficial mutation has been documented. The theme in the 1940 Pinocchio movie is the same faith Darwinian evolutionists have, which is anything is possible if you just believe. The scriptures cannot be used as evidence, so says some atheists. If so, then non-verifiable, theoretical Darwinian evolution cannot be used as evidence either to deny the evidence of God. I will not play by atheist rules that they themselves do not adhere to. I will present all the evidence that professes God exists, including the scriptures, verifiable science, the creation itself, logic, and reason. Being a former police investigator taught me to think critically about what secular science puts forth as evidence. Atheist evolutionists don't like to talk about the origins of life because they have no answers for it. Anytime someone brings up abiogenesis, which is necessary if there is no God, atheists deflect and obfuscate by saying, study microevolution because you just haven't studied it correctly and you don't know how evolution works. Creationists are told we should imagine macroevolution, then go back billions of years and imagine more, all of us starting from a single-celled organism that branched off into the Darwinian evolution tree. Well, that's what I call a con. And those proposing atheistic Darwinian evolution as science are, in fact, the con men. It's not even a good theory. Last week, the staff at Non Sequitur implored me to listen to Cy Gart because they explained that Cy was a Christian and that it was okay to believe in Darwinian evolution theory and still be a Christian, as most Christians believe in Darwinian molecules to man evolution. Even the Pope believes in evolution, the Non Sequitur crew said, as if I should heed the teachings of the false prophet of the world's largest cult. Well, I did an internet search, level of support for evolution, and according to a Pew Research Center, only 32% of the public believes in Darwinian evolution, and therefore the majority, 68%, do not accept it. So it appears the crew at Non Sequitur was caught fudging the numbers using fuzzy math to support their atheism beliefs. A Christian is defined as a believer in Jesus Christ and his teachings. Professed Christian Cy Gart believes mankind and all creatures evolved from single-cell life over the course of billions of years. The Genesis 1 account proclaims God created kinds of living creatures, birds, sea creatures, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth, and then mankind in his image. Yeshua, Messiah, Jesus Christ, later asks in Matthew 19, verse 4, Have you not read that he who made them in the beginning made them male and female? But Cy Gart, who claims to be a Christian, does not believe the words of Jesus Christ and says, in the beginning, life started off as a single-celled organism, then branched off. If Cy Gart does not believe the words and teachings of Jesus Christ, then he is not a Christian, and neither is the Catholic Pope for that matter. I laughed at Cy Gart's God-rejecting Darwinian evolution explanations, just as God would. An improvised sum and substance applied reading of Psalm 2, verse 1 through 4. Why do the people plot and scheme a vain thing, Darwinian evolution, against God and his word? He who sits in the heavens shall laugh. And so did I. Aaron Ra wanted me to answer the phylogeny challenge. My answer was that no man could answer due to insufficient data. I stated that moderate speciation does occur and that I do not believe that God created only one feline kind, as some creationists proclaim. I believe God created numerous felines such as lions, tigers, cougars, panthers, cheetahs, and other cats, and we see speciation in those created feline types. Cougars, since I wasn't around 6,000 years ago, and I didn't name all the animals in the Garden of Eden as Adam did, and the scriptures did not record every type of created kind of creature, nor the amount of types of kinds God created, there is insufficient data for me to answer the phylogeny challenge. Yet many atheists, such as Aaron Ra, do believe they have all the answers. Very well, atheists. With this in mind, I offer the Scripture Truth Ministries Abiogenesis Challenge. The Scripture Truth Ministries Abiogenesis Challenge is quite simple. Atheists, please present a reasonable theory of how inorganic elements arrange themselves into single-cell life forms, then test and verify your theory and replicate the formation of self-sustaining, self-replicating single-celled life forms for all the world to see. If any atheist can repeatedly demonstrate the formation of life from inorganic matter and prove abiogenesis is observable, testable, and verifiable, Scripture Truth Ministries will concede that there is no God needed for the creation of life, and thus there is no God, and Darwinian evolution is true. However, if the atheist community cannot prove through any scientific method that life can arise from the elements, then you, the atheist, must concede that a supernatural God is the most reasonable explanation as to how all life originated, and therefore conclude, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, is the most viable, probable truth. I will wait till kingdom come for any scientist to form life from non-organic elements. After that, you will all know that God exists. On to King Crocoduck. I'm an old earth creationist, and I believe in an ancient earth and universe, not a 6,000-year-old earth and universe, as young earth creationists do. With the exception of the age of the physical earth and universe, I do believe...
Hold on, George,
you
your mic
muted
cut.
yourself.
Your mic cut out.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know where it was, but with the exception of the age of the physical...
You said with the exception of...
With the exception of the age of the physical earth and universe, I do believe in most of young earth creationism's positions thereafter that God created all life upon the earth, including the dinosaurs, about 6,000 years ago. Radiocarbon dating to date the dinosaurs is refuted by secular science themselves and can be found in many easily accessible online articles. There is actual hard evidence, scientific evidence, that blood and tissue remains are being discovered recovered and discovered from dinosaurs today. The dinosaurs with blood and soft tissue remains on them were rapidly buried during the flood of Noah about 4,400 years ago. Had they been in the ground for 70 plus million years, there would be nothing left of their flesh in 100% of the cases. The pseudonym Crocoduck, I suppose, is used as a name to entertain his atheist followers and implies that a crocodile can, over time, become a duck. For you to proclaim that a crocodile can, over time, can become a duck, I would say is a crock of something else. On the other hand, I have heard Crocoduck's old Earth universe science, astrophysicism, whatever he calls it, and which I believe is sound. And as an old Earth creationist, I agree with his astronomy science points that I have heard thus far in some of his debates. Thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome.
King Crocoduck. We're gonna put. I think we're gonna put a timer on the next 2 rounds on the screen, so you guys will be able to follow along. In the meantime, I'm keeping time back here. So King Crocoduck, whenever you're ready, it's on to you.
Sure. I haven't got an opening statement prepared. I wasn't aware of the format of the debate, but I guess a good place to start would be the origin of my name, King Crocoduck. This is not actually an evolutionist talking point. It was a creationist talking point. Some years ago, the young Earth creationist Kirk Cameron went on live television to argue that if evolution were true, you should see these kind of chimeras, these kind of hybrids between different organisms. And he put up this photoshopped image of a duck with a crocodile head and said, we should be finding these. We should be finding crocoducks if evolution is true. And I use this this avatar in order to illustrate what I think is very typical of creationist arguments against topics that they frankly don't understand. Anyone who has an understanding of evolutionary theory will understand that this is not how it works. So I use this kind of just to poke fun. But I guess what I really want to address, and what took up the bulk of the opening statement, was the assertion repeated over and over that Christianity and evolution are not compatible. A Pew Research Forum figure was cited. It was said that people in America accept evolution, and that the rest don't. But the figure is exactly backwards. It's 33% who accept creationism, and the remaining who don't. Now, of course, I'm not saying that the majority opinion has any bearing on the truth value of a proposition. This is just to indicate that it's kind of the other way around, that the assertion that Christianity and evolution are incompatible is not borne out by the data. This holds true regardless of who you decide to partition as a Christian and who you don't. You know, it can be your personal opinion that Catholics are not really, really Christians. It can be your opinion that people like Francis Collins or Sigard aren't really, really Christians. But you know, I would submit to you that that isn't your decision to make. So I guess that's sort of the bulk of my opening statement. I do think it's a false dichotomy to say that you have to either believe in a God or you have to accept evolution and abiogenesis and all this other stuff. I do think there were some misconceptions concerning mutations and this, that, and the other. But I guess it would be more productive to have a kind of back and forth where we can talk about these matters organically and be able to develop our positions from there. So I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, we can do that. We'll just get rid of the timer then. Dave and George.
If you want to concede the balance, you've got 6 minutes of just going back and forth. If George wants to do that, that's fine, isn't it?
Yeah. Go ahead, George.
Okay, I agree with Crocoduck. I also looked up his name, and I did see that it was. So I'm aware of the Kirk Cameron founding of this image, and if that he wants to use, that's fine. I'm not. Anyone can use whatever kind of name they want to use. I'm not against that. I did see the origin of it, and it did come. What he's saying is true. But I'm looking right now at Wikipedia link, and it says according. Well, the dominant position among scientists that living things evolve due to natural processes is shared by only about a third, 32% of the public, and that's a Pew Research poll. So, again, this doesn't matter what the public thinks. 99% of the public could think something, and it could be wrong. So, I agree with him on that point. So, I'm looking
at the actual Pew Research Center article right now. It's from 2013. The way it's broken down, it says humans existed in present form since beginning, and that's at the 33 mark. Here's the exact quote from the article. It says, according to a new Pew Research Center analysis, 6 in 10 Americans, 60% say that humans and other living things have evolved over time, while a third agree with the idea of evolution. I agree that the point of whether, it's an argument ad populum if we're going to try to argue one way or the other, that this makes something true.
Right. It's probably a mixed question.
Yeah, right. So that's
right. I agree.
That issue's moot. I just want to illustrate that there's nothing that logically prevents a person from believing in a God who acts via natural processes. And this is not exclusive to Christians. This also holds true for deists. This holds true for a number of other religions. So that's sort of where I would stick that flag.
Well, I would disagree, because you have the Genesis account, which would disagree with the natural processes evolution. And you'd also have the words of Jesus Christ, who said in the beginning he created them male and female. He did not create them from the elements. Well, he created them from the elements, yes. He created man from the dust of the ground. So he created man directly from the dust of the ground, not through natural processes. So the scripture accounts do disagree with that, unfortunately. So to say you're a Christian and not believe the Christian scriptures, well, then you're not really a Christian, and by definition. A Christian is someone who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ. You can call yourself a Christian, but that doesn't make you.
I think that such Christians would argue that certain liberties are being taken with every interpretation, that they're not actually rejecting the teachings, they just have a different reading of it.
I don't see how else you could read in the beginning he made them male and female and say that's by natural processes.
Well, in the same manner, you can look at the book of Matthew. You can look at the book of Matthew in the beginning where they say so and so begot so and so, so and so begot so and so, and you can add up the numbers and end up with 6,000 years. But you reject that.
No, I do not reject it. I believe in old Earth. I believe in old Earth creationism. That is, the Earth and universe were created old, but life upon it was created 6,000 years ago. So
I see.
This is not a very popular position. Some people who are old Earth creationists believe in the evolution story, the standard one, and some people that are young Earth creationists block that by saying the Earth and universe were created 6,000 years ago. And I agree with you 110%, and your science that you presented in the Hovind debate. So I'm on board with you there. And actually, you didn't bring up one thing. And if you heard my debate with Hovind, it got to this point of ridiculousness. He believes that during the flood of Noah, I am not making this up, that I asked him how many asteroid impacts hit on the Earth. I believe they hit on an ancient Earth, and he thinks that during the flood, the fountains of the deep shot out cannonballs into space. I kid you not, and made craters on the moon and even planet Mercury, and some of them shot back down. I retorted, even if that is true, it would have ripped apart the planet. First of all. Second of all, not all of them would have came back down. You see some floating debris in space that would have got caught in orbit by all, like you'd see rings around Saturn. So it's a ridiculous thing, and they have to come up with this ridiculous kind of science because they're trying to defend a young Earth creationism and young Earth universe creationism, where science totally rejects that. And to be honest with you, the scriptures reject it too. Young Earth creationists are reading the scriptures wrong. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
I think you still stumble into some problems, though, when you look at the creation week and you look at the order of creation. I do think that even what astrophysicists would say contradicts severely. On days 2 and 3, day 2, the sea and the sky are created, and day 3, the land is created, and so are plants and trees. And then on day 4, the stars and the sun and the moon are created.
That's again what you just said. I'm going to correct that with my understanding. He didn't actually create the land and the sea. The sea was and the land was already created in the beginning. He rose the dry land on those days, and he did not create the sun and the moon on day 4. It doesn't say that the sun and moon are not mentioned on day 4. They're not mentioned. He created the light to light up the day, and he created the light to light up the night. What I think that would mean that the earth was floating free in space, and he created the sun thereafter, the earth. And I don't believe that. I believe the earth was created in the beginning with the sun, and the sun, I believe he ignited on day 4. I believe it was a gas giant, and he ignited it on day 4, creating the light for the earth. The sun and moon are mentioned elsewhere throughout Scripture, and that day 4, sun and moon are not named. So he didn't create them. He created the light for the day, and he created the light for the night by igniting the sun. That's what I believe. And that's why I think young earth creationists are wrong. And he didn't create the stars on day 4. He said, and by the way, he created the stars also. He created the stars in the beginning, billions of years ago. That's my belief, and I think young earth creationists got this wrong.
Hey, you're entitled to your reading, just as I think that the Christian evolutionists are entitled to their reading. So, but I guess we could leave this to the side and sort of just jump straight into the meat of the issue concerning your objection. You said there's never been a beneficial mutation. Could you elaborate on what exactly you mean?
Well, okay. We have dinosaurs, and some evolutionists believe dinosaurs became birds. Therefore, their torsos would have had to grow wings and feathers and begin to fly. I believe that birds were created with the dinosaurs using a similar construction that works. Bipedal creatures that lay eggs. Now, just because they're similarly constructed doesn't mean one became the other. I believe dinosaurs lived 6,000 years ago, and they were created with the birds. How you ever see you got Astronomy, whatever that dinosaur called, where they have a winged dinosaur supposedly, and there's evolution. I know that's supposedly the proof, Archaeopteryx, whatever they call it, but I don't know the name of it per se. Right, but but that's your proof, and we don't see this in the natural world. We don't see anytime we see someone growing a limb that doesn't belong there. It's a non-beneficial mutation. Or we see a cow growing 5 legs. That doesn't help the cow. That actually hurts the cow. We don't see pigs. I know you'll say it happens over billions of years, but we don't see it in a short amount of time, and it's not going to progress over billions of years or millions of years. That just doesn't happen, and we don't see that.
I disagree. I think there are multiple lines of evidence you can look at to suggest that this does happen gradually. I agree that Archaeopteryx was not the child of a wingless dinosaur. Nobody suggests that this is the case. You have over time these accumulations of mutations, most of which have very little effect on the organism, but they do accumulate. We're not the clones of our parents. I don't have exactly the same DNA as my mother and father, and neither do you. We all have some degree of mutations. I believe we're all born with something like 130 mutations, and then we accumulate another 30 over our lifetimes due to epigenetics. And over time, these do culminate. These mutations do accumulate, and that's sort of the driving mechanism. And then what sculpts it, whatever makes sure that only what's quote unquote beneficial to that particular environment remains. That's natural selection. It's just a filtration system. If it's suited to the environment, it gets to live long enough to reproduce. If it's not suited to the environment, it dies. It's pretty straightforward. And the ones that live, they get to pass on their genes, and more gets added onto that. More mutations get added onto that over the generations. What I'm curious about, you say that birds, like contemporary avians, were around at the same time as the dinosaurs. Why do we not find any birds in the same geological layers as dinosaurs?
Well, because the dinosaurs would have flooded in the flood of Noah first, and the birds would have flew above the waters until they got tired of flapping their wings, and they would have drowned somewhere along the top of the waters. And since their bones are usually hollowed out and they're lighter, they probably wouldn't sink to the level of dinosaurs. I mean, this is just a matter of gravity. I know that the evolutionist doesn't believe that for 1 second. I believe that there's ages and ages and ages and levels of these ages. And I think Kevin Hovind has explained that quite well, better than I could. But, I believe in his teaching on that, the so-called geological columns that he teaches on. But I don't believe that, why do we find seashells on the top of every mountain range in the world? So, I could ask the same question. And the evolutionist response was, yeah, I know. They were once the bottom of the, and they rose up. I heard that, but I don't buy that. I don't see that really as a viable. They're intact seashells often too, which would mean that they were not scavenged afterwards. They were rapidly buried, and that's a problem.
Sure. Yeah. During different depositional environments will produce different layers, and you're going to have different types of organisms buried in these layers, and this will include things that belong to the organisms, like their seashells. But getting back to the issue, what about bananas? Did the bananas also outrun the dinosaurs? Why don't we see any banana plants at the same time? And you can. I guess the problem is you really have to come up with this contrived scenario where, for some reason, dinosaurs were not able to outrun, say, some prehistoric creature that came before them and was therefore, that came after them, some slow prehistoric creature. Let's say I don't know, fossilized snails, right? That's a bad example. Slow mammal, let's say a hippopotamus, yeah. Or maybe an elephant, we don't find any fossil elephants. We don't find any fossil elephants in the same layer as the dinosaurs. They're always ordered in the order that evolutionary theory predicts, and you never find discrepancies from this. You always find the least complex organisms at the bottom and most contemporary organisms at the top. And the complexity stays consistent. So the ones that are least complex, organisms of equally low complexity persist throughout each of the layers, but it rises incrementally as you look up higher and higher, more and more recently on the geological column.
Yeah, that geological column is often been shown to be circular reasoning. You said out a banana tree, why aren't they found with the dinosaurs? Well, I don't know what kind of trees they are, but there have been numerous trees going through numerous geological column layers. So that shows that geological column was not laid during millions of years. It was laid rapidly. That is true. That's been shown. Well, I don't know how you can dispute that, but. Okay.
I can dispute it because I've seen this lecture by Hovind as well. It's in my fifth Hovind commentary. You could check it out if you want. But if you look at the original work where this was published, it's called Arcadian Geology was the name of the text where they put in the photograph of this tree going through supposedly multiple geological layers. Those are different riverbed layers. There were multiple. What you effectively had was graded bedding. You had a layer of larger materials that were at the bottom, and then the less dense materials floated to the top. And what you ended up with superficially resembled geological layers, but in fact were not. The composition is completely different. It's a completely different situation.
Well, I would not agree with that per se, but I do also know one thing. Anytime something is found in a layer where it doesn't fit the narrative, they all of a sudden change it and say, they play with the evidence because they have a narrative and they're sticking to it. And
when did that happen?
When didn't it happen is the better question.
I would be thrilled to hear one example of, say, bunny fossils being found.
I don't know.
Give us a citation. George, I could put the link in the video description or in the live chat now. You can provide it to us.
Here's the thing. You asked me just a second ago, why don't we find elephants with dinosaurs, correct?
Sure.
Why would we find elephants with dinosaurs? Do you really think they grouped together? No, the elephants hung out with the elephants and the dinosaurs with the dinosaurs. They're not going to be in the same exact location.
They don't have to be in the same location. What I'm saying is they have to be in the same layer. They have to be in the same composition.
There are dinosaurs found in the ice of Antarctica. They're not in any layers at all. Okay, so how did they get there? I mean, there's a lot of dinosaurs found in all different layers. So to say they're only found in one specific layer is not being intellectually honest.
Well, you find them in like the Cretaceous layer and the Jurassic layer. That's fine, but you only find them within these particular layers. You don't find them for.
We find dinosaurs in different. We don't have to always dig down a million layers and then label a layer. It's not exactly true. We find them in the ice in Antarctica. How did they get there? Well, here's a theory. Antarctica wasn't always a frozen tundra. It was once a tropical climate where dinosaurs could live. Now, if the Earth was always the way it is now, I'd like to. I've seen an article about ice dinosaurs living in Antarctica and just living in the frozen tundra. Well, I think and what were they supposed to eat? They were supposed to eat like what? Because there's nothing there to eat. That's not what the dinosaurs, a brachiosaur type. They find a lot of brachiosaurs in Antarctica. Okay. And I don't think they're counting the layers. Okay. And besides, a lot of, in the last 4,400 years, there's a lot of ice layers that rain down on those bones anyway. So they're not always neatly arranged in the layer that you'd like them to be. And when they're not, you don't really count that. You only have circular reasoning and you put them into the layer you want to.
Okay, I think there's some misconceptions here. I think continental drift accounts for how dinosaurs could have been in a tropical climate in Antarctica. There's no problem there really. The second misconception is that they're not necessarily buried in the ice. Beneath the ice, there is sediment. There are sedimentary layers. It's inside of these layers and not inside of the ice that the dinosaurs are buried at, and they're buried within layers whose compositions correspond to a certain depositional environment that corresponded to the time period in which the sediment was laid down. And we find consistently they're only confined to the same subset of layers, regardless of whether we're looking in Antarctica, regardless of whether we're looking in Africa or Europe. They're all within the layers that are composed of the same material. I don't remember what exactly the layer is for Jurassic or Triassic period. Let's say for the sake of argument, one of them is chalk and one of them is limestone, and that all of the other layers are, of course, going to be composed of different types of sediment. It's only going to be in this hypothetical situation inside of chalk layers and inside of limestone layers that you find dinosaurs. And you never find them in, let's say, a layer corresponding to something more recent, let's say sediment. It's only going to be those ones. And this holds true across the entire planet. And I guess my question is why?
Well, that would be consistent with a global flood, because whatever level they normally settle down over a global flood is where they would probably settle worldwide in a certain level. Now, I mean, how would woolly mammoths frozen in the ice standing up? And a lot of these creatures, including dinosaurs, are found with food still in their mouth because they died rapidly, and sometimes they died in groups. So sure, evolutionists have addressed this. And they said it was usually I know it's usually due to a local flood. I heard those arguments before, and
it's not just local floods. It could be all kinds of seismic. It could be all kinds of seismic activity. It could be volcano eruptions. The people of Pompeii did not die in a flood, and we still have their remains standing up.
Right. I understand that, but if you're looking at the evidence and saying why all these dinosaurs, you could look at it two ways. You could say, well, that was when they were buried in this certain Cretaceous period, 70 million years ago. Or you could say, well, anytime you have a global flood, it's going to leave a lot of layers, and they were all basically the same kind of creatures buried at the same kind of levels on a global scale.
But it's not necessarily when you look at the geological column model, you get this kind of superficial sense of, okay, some of them are physically above the others. And to a certain extent, that's true. But under this picture, it's like there are no dinosaurs on mountaintops. All across the globe, you have dinosaurs being found at different altitudes. It's not the altitude that makes the difference. It's the actual composition of the layer that it's buried in. It's not the altitude that tells us how old it is. It's the layer.
You wouldn't find a dinosaur on a mountaintop, but you have found whales on mountaintops. Now, why wouldn't you find dinosaurs on mountaintops? Okay, you should, because but if they were not living on those mountaintops when the flood came, you wouldn't find them there. Now, if a flood came and the whales were floating all around,
this is where the misconception is at, though. It's not about the altitude. This isn't. If a layer is physically on top of another layer, there's a possibility of what's called an angular unconformity, where some sort of seismological activity flipped the layer upside down, and there are going to be traces of this. And in different parts of the globe, the same layer, the same kind of composition, let's say chalk, is going to be maybe 1,000 feet higher than the chalk layer somewhere else on a different part of the globe. But in both of those chalk layers, you still have the same types of organisms, and it holds true for the dinosaurs as well, irrespective of what the altitude of the layer is.
Very well. Like I said, you would have to assume from a flood perspective that the chalk layer would not be consistent throughout the whole world at a certain depth, but the dinosaur that drowned would be consistent wherever he stood on the ground and he drowned. So he might be one dinosaur might be.
But why are they all standing in the chalk layer is what I'm asking. Because there are different altitudes, and there are different altitudes, but they all decided, okay, we're going to congregate in the layer where there's going to be chalk. And then a different type of organism, say elephant, they decide, okay, we're all going to congregate in the areas where there are limestone, and we're going to do this across the globe. How exactly does this work?
I don't find that to be true, and I don't think it is true. And I can ask you, do you really believe that dinosaurs have soft tissue and blood remains in them, and some dinosaurs are found intact recently, if they really buried for 100+ million years in the mud? And I fact checked what Steve said, that dinosaur, the 110 million year old dinosaur, was buried in rock. It was not. I'm sorry, they were drilling in the sand and they hit something, and what they hit was that dinosaur. Had they been drilling through rock, they would have just kept on drilling. Sorry, Steve, I fact checked you. And you just, again, you're not being honest, and that's not what I read.
Or sandstone.
Can I address this real quick since it's addressed to me? I'm always honest. I'll send you a video of actually the procedure, how long it took to actually excavate that particular creature from the stone that it was in. Matter of fact, it is still stone. It's made of stone.
No, they were excavating because they didn't want to ruin the dinosaur. I don't think it was because they were trying to get it out of stone. They were drilling through sand and mud, and they hit something. And then when they hit that something, they're like, what is this? And then they realized they had a dinosaur, or they thought they had something like that. And then they took their time in excavating it. But
why would you drill through sand? Wouldn't you need to dig?
I think that they were drilling for oil or something like that. I'm not sure why they were drilling, but they were drilling for something.
It's interesting you bring up oil, because this is actually the result of processes that took place hundreds of millions of years ago with living organisms. The reason we even have fossil fuels is because of this process that happened to prehistoric creatures. They would die inside of aquatic environments. They would sink to the bottom. And eventually, under high temperature and high pressure systems, a certain subset of them are going to decompose and turn into fossil fuels, which 200-300 million years later we end up digging up.
That's an interesting theory. Again, it's not proven, and I'll tell you why it's not proven, because they've been going back into old oil wells, and apparently the earth itself is churning up oil, and it's not necessarily fossil fuels. And I have a few articles on that too. So what has been assumed to be fossil fuels might not be the case at all. And it might not be just dinosaurs. It could be plants or any other kind of inorganic matter. And I don't even think it's that. I think the earth is churning up something, and they attributed it to being fossil fuels. And I don't know if there's any how you would say organic matter that you could test from the oil, so to prove that it was once living.
Carbon based.
But I don't know.
But of course it's organic. It's carbon based.
There's carbon on planet Neptune, I believe. That doesn't mean it's there's organic life there. The carbon is it doesn't necessarily indicate life in 100% of the cases. I don't think. So I
Not
mean,
100%
that's been
of the case,
assumed.
but I'm not talking just about carbon. I'm talking about organic molecules, things like methane.
Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting that they're going back into old oil fields and it's still finding it's been refilled. How does an oil field get refilled with oil unless it's seeping out from the earth somewhere?
I would have to know the full story of that, but I can tell you though that I'm very skeptical of what you're telling me, because this is a multi-billion-dollar industry. You know, I was checking ExxonMobil's stock just a couple hours ago, and it's at $86. Their annual revenue, I think, is in the hundreds of before all the costs of operation, things like that, it's in the hundreds of billions.
Maybe about.
But here's the thing,
George. Let me finish.
Maybe about okay.
Here's the thing.
Go ahead, King.
Every year, they're spending tens of millions of dollars on geologists, petroleum geologists, and geophysicists. And if you look up like the salaries for petroleum geologists, petroleum geophysicists, you know, these are people making like six figures. You know, we're talking the median income of about $140,000 a year. They consult with ExxonMobil. And what they do is they go to regions where they're prospecting for, okay, potentially there's oil here, but they need to know, how much oil is actually there, and so that they can estimate, what's a cost-effective size of a good operation, how big should the well be, how many staff should they have on hand, things like that. So what they do is they remove these cylindrical segments of the sediment there. And they look at these different layers and they look for evidence of its geological history, the history of the seismic activity, the history of the coarseness of whether there was an aquatic environment, things like that. And all of these are dated as well. And what they end up doing is they do end up finding, okay, you have this much of this kind of gas in a pocket that's this big, and the ideal place to put your well and start drilling for the oil is here. And they are spending millions and millions of dollars on specialists like this every year to help them find these locations. And they're all operating under, all of their methodology is operating under this paradigm of hundreds of millions of years.
Okay. Well, here's the little factoid. About 20, 30 years ago, I'm sure you're old like me by now, we used to be running scared. They used to tell us the oil wells were running out. We were going to run out of petroleum. They no longer say that anymore. Why is that? Because there's knowledge now that this oil is being churned up from the earth. They found a huge oil well in Israel as well. I'm not buying the story that is all from dinosaurs, okay? You can believe that if you want to.
The reason they're finding... Hold on. The reason that they started finding these new oil wells is because these jobs, our understanding of geophysics phenomena started booming at around the 70s and 80s, and the prices reflect this. You can look at the history of ExxonMobil, and you can see the prices of the value of the stocks took off at around the same time when all of these geophysical methods. Geophysicist methods started being developed in the 70s and the 80s to allow them to more efficiently find these new oil wells, and doing again under this hundreds of millions of years old paradigm.
They're not running out of oil. I can tell you that right now. We can make electric cars if we want to, but oil is still going to be here for a long time. Because I don't believe it's being made by I believe it's running out, because if it was made from the dinosaurs, you'd have a finite amount. And I don't believe it's being made from the dinosaurs. I believe the earth is somehow churning out this carbon mix of fuel that we use. But anyway, that's a matter of science. Not an expert on this topic, but I still have one question for all you atheists. Is anyone willing to take this Scripture Truth Ministries Abiogenesis challenge? It should be real easy to show us, creationists, how you get life from inorganic matter without a supernatural God engineering it. I will even give you intelligent life, human beings, to engineer inorganic matter into organic matter. So I will even give you a head start, not just nature alone. You could engineer it yourself without using organic matter, create life. Go ahead. Anyone willing to take the Scripture Truth Ministries Abiogenesis challenge?
I'm detecting a logical fallacy here. Why do I mean? It sounds as though you're saying that either we demonstrate right now that abiogenesis is something that we can replicate, or else the God is responsible for the existence of life. I mean, if we were having this conversation 500 years ago, you could challenge me to show you the mechanism by which the heavenly bodies are held in place. You know, why isn't the moon falling into the earth? And without the framework of classical mechanics, without the progress of knowledge that was going to take place, I wouldn't have been able to answer your question. And you could have said, "Aha! This is proof that God is twirling the planets around his head on invisible strings." I mean, this is what kind of argument is this? It's an argument from ignorance. It's saying because we are ignorant of a particular phenomenon, but we're going to cram God into this gap.
Well, fine. Well, I would also say that you're making a logical fallacy that God does not exist when you don't have, when you're not able to prove it. And you're saying that we need to prove God exists, and I'm saying you can't prove God doesn't exist. And I give you a challenge that engineer life from non-life, and you have won the debate. It's over. But until that happens,
I will not win the debate. Hold on. I will not win the debate, even if I manage to produce self-replicating organic molecules from non-self-replicating organic molecules. Even if I could demonstrate that to you right now, that would not constitute a win of the debate, because then you would go on to say, aha, this is proof that life requires a creator. We've never seen it happen spontaneously. And then if we ever did demonstrate it happening spontaneously, then you would say, okay, this is just another means by which God uses his creative abilities. I mean, the debate would never go where if we pursued this line of reasoning. This is just a red herring.
Well, that's fine. I'm asking you to either show me that it happens spontaneously through nature, and I'm even giving you a head start. You're able to do it yourself, and I'm saying you can't even do that. So with intelligent life, with all your greatest scientists in the world, you will not be able to create life from inorganic matter. Now, you could, fine, don't do it. Show me in nature where this occurs. It should be happening all the time. You're trying to tell me it must have been a freaking rainy day on Tuesday in the creation of the universe when the lightning struck just right and created the life, and just, forget about Goldilocks. You had to have a super Goldilocks day for that to happen. We live in a Goldilocks zone is what people say. The Earth is just the right distance from the sun that we could have water, and then we could have therefore life. You'd have to have a super Goldilocks day in order for the molecules to arrange themselves into self-replicating, self-sustaining life forms. And show me that in nature. And if you can't do that, and you want to use scientists to create life out of inorganic matters, that's the Scripture Truth Ministries challenge. I will sell my house and give the proceeds to any scientist who could do this, and I will go homeless. Okay, that's my challenge.
But you are going to lose this challenge eventually. Eventually, scientists are going to find a way to develop means to turn organic materials into self-replicating organic materials.
Then I'll lose the challenge. I'll wait till Kingdom Come,
then you'll know. But you're still hold on. But you're still going to believe in God. The point. No,
I just told you I won't. I just told you I won't. I just told you I won't. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I will give up God, and I will proclaim atheism and Darwinian evolution if you can create life. Go ahead.
I think that's a logical. I think that's a logically flawed position. I don't think that one necessarily.
Then if I don't do that, then you could show me to be a liar. So either way, I lose. That's my challenge.
I'm not talking about you personally, but whether you personally hold to your promise or not, whatever your particular standards of integrity are is irrelevant. I'm talking specifically about this argument and the logical soundness of it. My claim is that this is a non sequitur.
Can we kind of go back to? Hang on one sec. Let me moderate for a second. We're kind of moving away from the actual topic. The challenge you have for your organization, we can discuss another time. But we all agree with KC right now. It is an argument from ignorance. It's a logical fallacy. Let's get back to actually the topic of you guys having discussion between the older and the non-creationist models, because the challenge has nothing to do with this particular topic at all.
Well, I would say one thing about faith. You have some people on your show you were talking about before I came on, and Robert Genesis, I think his name is. His center the Earth. That's crazy theory. I heard him before. It's flat Earth people still exist. I know it doesn't matter how much evidence you show them. I'm not against science. I'm not. You show me the Earth from space, and I see it's round, it's a sphere, and you still want to believe it's flat, and you're doctoring those photos. I mean, this would be the greatest conspiracy without a reason in the history of the world. But I'm not one of those people. Okay, I have reasoned faith, and if you could demonstrate to me through science, demonstratable, testifiable, verifiable science, then I will lose my faith. So, but that's why I have the challenge that I issued. And you want to talk about dinosaurs and stuff, and this is evidence of long-term evolution, but I want to talk about abiogenesis, because without this you have a God. And what is your theory that the molecules can arrange themselves? Okay, I know that's a fallacy. I know, I heard you. It's a fallacy. I know. It's a conclusion based on a certain set of things, and I hear what you're saying, but
it's the reason. I'm not just saying it's a fallacy just so I can throw the word fallacy out there and impeach the argument on by fiat. I'm saying that the structure of the argument is flawed. That we would not accept this kind of reasoning for anything else. You could point to any scientific matter that we're ignorant of, be it the emergence of consciousness, or the manner in which gravitons interact to produce gravity. You could say, okay, show me a single scientist who can produce gravity. Take the gravitons and put them together and spontaneously create gravity. And unless you do that, then you have shown that only God can create gravity. I mean, you could do this with literally anything. Name any scientific issue that we were ever ignorant about, and insert yourself back in time prior to our understanding of that particular phenomenon, and pose the same exact challenge, and it would make just as much sense.
And George, we had some. Let me say this real quick, George. We had some questions from the last time you were here, and I think maybe this will kind of steer it back towards a more sturdy ground here. But some of the questions that were asked is the difference between your model of what you call old Earth creation and what the young Earth creation model is, because a lot of people seem to think that there are a lot of things that overlap between the two. So what do you, can you kind of go through your model and explain what the difference is between those two that allows you to be able to say, no, I'm not a young Earth creationist, but old Earth?
Okay, I'll do that. I just wanted to briefly address. I agree with Crocoduck that you are, and atheists are ignorant of abiogenesis. And therefore, you need faith to believe it. That is faith. Okay. And I will go on to the differences between my and young Earth creationism. I believe in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Heavens there refers to the planets, the stars, and everything you see in the heavens. And it will remain that way for billions of years. And you had a problem with this last week. You told me, well, if God did that, that would be a crazy God. He left us here billions of years without creation. And then you said, but then if I took the other position and said, well, I'm a young Earth creationist, then you'd say, well, that's not true, because obviously the Earth is a lot older than billions of years, so you can't win with someone like you. You just don't want to believe in God. But as for my position, I believe that in the beginning, billions of years ago, God created the heavens and the earth. Then, about 6,000 years ago, don't have a date, I don't know exactly when, but about 6,000 or so years ago, just like young Earth creationists would believe, God began to hover upon the earth through his spirit, and he separated the land from the seas, and he created the dry land, and then he created the light on day one, and let there be light, and then he created the dry land, and he created the plants, and then on day 4, he illuminated the sun. He didn't just do this. Created the 100 billion trillion stars on day 4. No, he didn't do that, because that would be out of proportion from what he did during the rest of the week. And every day during the week, he said, then God said. In the beginning, he didn't say, then God said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. No, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then God said, day 1, let there be light. And there was light. The earth was without form, and darkness was on the face of the earth. Then God said, day 1, let there be light. And the day and the night was one day, and then God said day 2 became, and then God said it started every single day during that week. So that's what I believe. That is a lot more reasonable with science, and that's what the scriptures actually say. I'm not trying to just blend with science. I'm trying to say, if you go to Isaiah 45:18, I believe, it says God created the earth and he made it. two different acts. He created it in the beginning. He made it during the creation week. So
it's not that, George, it's not that I had a problem last time. I just asked you what God was doing in the meantime after he created the planet and billions of years ago, and then when he decided to do 6,000 years ago to put life on it. That's what I was getting at.
Okay. According to Jesus' statement, John 17, verse 5, give me the glory I had with you before the world was. Now, the world was created in the beginning, so he's referring to when the world was created for life, was formed. So there's 100 billion trillion stars out there, which means there's probably a trillion planets around those stars. And if you think that God should have done everything on Earth first, well, that's an Earth-centric view. And yeah, God has a big universe. Who says that we're the only created kinds out there of intelligent life for others? And I know you brought up, well, did Jesus die for other people on other planets? Well, I don't know. I don't think he did, because he would have been expert at it by the time he got to Earth, So I think this was the first time he went through it,
We gotta check our human.
Here.
But so I think he was.
What's that? Casey broke up. What's it, Casey?
I said we got to check our human privilege.
Yeah, Earth-centric.
Oh yes,
privilege. But God is God, right?
King, do you want to respond to that?
I'm just curious. God is all powerful. How long does it take for him to do all this stuff?
Yeah, that's a good question. All things are possible with God, correct? You've heard that statement. Well, I think people misunderstand it. All things that are possible with God. I mean, it's not possible for God to sin. It was when Jesus said to the Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, meaning hanging on the cross, because I don't want to go through with this. This is too hard for me to do. And he said, well, it's not possible. And he put him on the cross and he went through with it. But let my will be done, let your will be done, is what he said back to the Father. So the Father's will is to have him hung on the cross. It wasn't possible for him to forgive mankind without someone taking the punishment of mankind. So not everything is possible with God. Okay. It's not possible that God, well, if God was going to cheat and lie and steal, theoretically it is possible, but then it would be impossible for him to be holy. So you can't be both.
All right, before we get too far, there was a lot there in the last three back and forth. So let King Crocoduck catch up with addressing those, and then we can pick up on that last statement.
Well, there's not much to address. I mean, it's just his reading of this particular scripture. I typically don't argue theology, although I am happy to argue good versus bad philosophy and good versus bad epistemology. But yeah, there's little to comment on here.
Okay, George, before we move into the Q&A, because I know there's a lot of questions in the live chat, and if there's anybody on the stream element side, we'll get those in. But what we'll do now is just kind of let you wrap up your statement, and then I'm getting an echo. Is anybody else getting that?
Not for me. My mic's cut.
You are, George? Okay, somebody's echoing.
Mild echo.
Okay. So yeah, go ahead and wrap up your view. Any kind of closing statements you want to do? Then we'll move over to King, and then we'll open it up for everybody who has questions in the live chat to get those in.
Well, I would just like to say about the Abiogenesis challenge, I'm willing to sell my house if anyone can show me that life could form from non-life. And I would like to say this, that it must have been a real Goldilocks day when life was created if molecules can arrange themselves in self-replicating, self-sustaining life forms, because we don't see that occur in nature. It should still be occurring. Doesn't occur. You got, am I making a fallacious statement by saying, therefore God believes we should believe in God? Well, you can make the fallacious statement by saying we shouldn't believe in God, and here's why: evolution. That's what I believe is the fallacious statement, and that's all I'd have to say.
Okay, that last part I actually do agree with. I don't think that accepting evolution necessarily entails that a God does not exist. My atheism is not predicated on my acceptance of evolutionary theory. If I were to stop accepting evolution, if I were to completely dismiss even the possibility of abiogenesis, if I were to do that tomorrow, it would not change my views on theology, on religion.
What is your theology?
Hold on, George, let me finish, and then
No, I'm happy to take it. I can anticipate the question. My atheism is rooted in my commitment to methodological naturalism. Um, God does not fall within the parameters of things that I think are measurable and are knowable. This makes him functionally indistinguishable from not existing. So he doesn't make it into my ontology. That's why I'm an atheist.
Yeah, I addressed this last week. This is a term, methodological naturalism. What you call methodological naturalism, I call supernatural naturalism. And we've never observed a methodological naturalism to occur, which is supernatural naturalism. However, we have evidence of a supernatural God.
Hold on, what do you mean for it to occur?
We have never seen evidence of methodological naturalism, which I call supernatural naturalism.
But
it's theoretical. It's not observed.
George,
and we have evidence of a supernatural God.
King Crockett, can you clarify for him what methodological naturalism is? Because I don't think he's understanding the term.
That's what I'm doing. When I say methodological naturalism, I'm talking about a means of appraising the world. I'm talking, as the methodological part implies, it's a means of looking at the world and investigating it with reason and evidence especially. So when you ask me where's the evidence for methodological naturalism, the only coherent way I can interpret this is where's the evidence of people employing methodological naturalism. And hello, here I am. This methodological naturalism proven. People use it. It exists. It's a way of appraising the world. What do you mean by methodological naturalism? Like what do you agree with how I'm putting it, or do you have a completely different conception?
Well, I thought you were speaking of a methodological progression of the world evolving or the universe evolving, and which again I would say we don't see. It's theoretical from the Big Bang to galaxy formations to orderly galaxies and planetary systems, and then afterward evolution of life on Earth. And that's what I would think that you were talking about, methodological naturalism. Now, if I'm wrong and you have a different definition, I don't know.
What I would say is that the transition of the universe's state from a very hot and dense state immediately after the Big Bang to a very cool and sparse state as we see it today, and accompanied by all other kinds of state transitions, from a bunch of dust and gas that was interspersed throughout throughout all empty space, to the current state where it's coalesced into these structures. I would say that all of these processes are accommodated by natural physical processes.
Yeah, but the creation of matter itself is an issue because we never witnessed instantaneous, spontaneous creation of matter. And unless matter always existed, we'd have... Okay, explain that one to me, please.
Sure. Pair creation is a typical example. You have a certain amount of energy, and using the equation E = mc squared, you have the emergence of matter and antimatter. And in fact,
that's a chemical reaction.
It's a physical reaction. These are not chemicals. These are subatomic.
Yeah, it's not chemical.
You know what I meant, physical. I misspoke.
Well, it has mass. So I guess mass is where I'm going with this. Creation of well, actually, hold on a second. An antiproton technically is antihydrogen. So
it's ion of hydrogen. If you want to get technical, because hydrogen.
Sure, yeah. Sure, but that's still a chemical. Well, I'd have to think about it.
Is it reduced to physics or chemistry? The old argument.
Yeah, it's a bit of I guess it's a bit of a gray zone, but let's put the matter question to the side and just look at mass. Something that exerts gravitational force. That we do see emerging
out of nothing.
Out of energy.
Such as?
What do you mean?
I'm sitting right here in
So
my room.
I gave the example of electrons and positrons emerging from energy. Yeah, you have to generate this in order for things like PET scans to work. PET stands for positron emission tomography, and basically what happens is these antiparticles, they go into your brain, they interact with the electrons in your brain, and they allow.
That's more of a change of physical state of matter. It's not a creation of matter from nothingness. So it doesn't quite fit the equation I'm talking about.
But the kind of nothingness you're describing, where even energy is not present, that doesn't exist.
Well,
every system every system has a minimum energy state called a ground state. And you cannot have lower energy than the ground state. That just doesn't exist.
Well, you're starting with something, you're always starting with something, and that's the issue with the universe. I mean, I'm sure there's blank, empty space out there without any kind of protons or neutrons or anything. It's just empty void space.
Yeah, but that still has energy, right? Yeah, it's still in the ground state.
It still has a quantum field. It still has a Higgs field. It still has fields that go through that space, George. It's not completely empty.
Fine, and this is indicative of a creator, so someone putting it there in place, and not that it always existed. That's what we disagree on.
The kind of nothing that you're talking about doesn't exist, and for there's no reason to believe that even can exist.
I see. Okay, we differ.
Okay.
Well, okay, but that's just what the physics says. Nothing of that kind doesn't exist.
That's because we're in the fishbowl looking at the water around us, and we can't see outside the water because God lives outside of space and time. So I believe that's not quite true because we're in this fishbowl called the universe.
What does it mean for him to be outside of space and time? Because when I think of something's location with respect to something else, I am using a coordinate system. By definition, there is space involved. Do you mean that he resides within a different kind of space, or that he resides within some kind of void where space is? I don't even know how I would conceptualize, even mathematically.
I don't know either, because God is God, and he probably is in a different dimension. He can come out in and out of this dimension and go into another dimension. We really don't know. We have to find these things out when we learn more about God and the universe that we live in. You're asking me to ask a question about where does God exist. If I knew, I'd give him a phone call. But, all I could do is pray. And I knock on his door, but I can't really get my spaceship and travel there, can I?
You'll be able to use cell phone in a couple of weeks, because that comes out.
I tell you what, that a call to God, though, is not going to be cheap.
It can't be. Okay, we got some questions.
I'll stick with prayer.
We got some questions here that we're going to get to here in just a second. But George, in light of the Pew Research thing, we can take back that the staff at Non Sequitur, i.e. me and Steve, were trying to fudge the numbers, right?
I could take it back. I don't know. I just know what I read, that 32% of the people agree with Darwinian evolution, and that means 68% don't agree with it, at least 100%. So I'm not going to...
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, no, finish. Go ahead,
I just said that go ahead. You can fit. I just said 32%, according to what I just read on Wikipedia. That's what it said. Sure. That's all I was referring to.
The problem I can tell you, I don't know anybody that adheres to Darwinian evolution. Darwinian evolution is about 150 years out of date. I'm not a Darwinian evolutionist. I reject Darwinian evolution. It's not a valid theory. It only entailed natural selection, and it didn't take into account genetics and many other things like epigenetics or evo devo. Nobody is a Darwinist. You don't find any biologist going around saying I'm a Darwinist unless they mean it in a very, very colloquial term. So when you're running these kinds of polls, I think the terminology matters. If the question had been asked, do you think evolutionary theory adequately describes biodiversification? And I think that probably been almost overwhelming, or a hell of a lot higher. And I'll ask you that question, and maybe King, would you also like to weigh in on that? Because I think there's a distinction between Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, which I'm not neo-Darwinistic either, and then theory of evolution. Would you want to address that, George?
Well, I would agree it is biodiversity based on microevolution, but what Cy Gart was professing last week was that we first get all the cats, and then they can become the feline kind, and from the feline we go to the mammal, and if we branch back further enough, we get to the single-celled organism. That's what I thought you were talking about, and if I was mistaken, and you have some other kind of evolution theory that you weren't proposing that week, I apologize.
Yeah, the theory of evolution just describes. Yeah, I accept too. The theory of evolution just describes why we see the extant species we see. That's the whole basis behind the theory of evolution. And King Crocoduck, do you want to weigh on that, if you like?
I have nothing to contribute on this.
Okay. Yeah, I know you're.
All right. Can I say one thing?
So, sure, of course. Sure.
Yeah, like I know you've had, or I've heard him argue with people. Like Ken Hovind, for instance, believes that there was one cat and one dog on the Ark. Now, I don't believe that. I believe there's probably was a tiger, there was probably a lion, there was probably a few different types of felines, not just one, and they didn't branch off, and the lion that got off the Ark became the little kitty cat they have in your pet in your house. Could that theoretically possibly happen over enough time? Possibly, but I don't think that's the kind of speciation that happened in the last 3,000 or 3,500 years or so.
Yeah, well, let's go to something else we want. Did King, you want to?
He's asking about the kinds thing.
Kinds.
King, did you want to address that? Or
the kinds thing? Well, in my experience, the word kinds doesn't really have a clear definition associated with it. It sort of means whatever is convenient at the time, and in my experience has been used to equivocate and engage in goalpost shifting. When I confronted Ray Comfort, for example, his definition of kind ranged from subspecies to entire domains. And if you're allowed to, range the word kinds in that manner, then you can always stay one step ahead of whatever evolutionary explanation is given to you.
Okay. And by the way, guys, stick around. As soon as Q&A is over, we have a special video presentation for you guys. Mr. Atheist recently did a PSA for Steven Anderson, and we want to play a clip of that because it turned out really well. So just stick around. Once Q&A is over, we'll play that for you guys. All right, Steve?
It was really good. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah, one other thing we want to address, George, Dave, can you show the picture of the notosaur? This is a 110 million year old fossil. There was a notosaur discovered. It was literally just found in a block of stone. And I read parts of these different articles because you said it's not stone. Much of which remains hidden in a 35,000 pound block of stone. Matter of fact, they said when Funk stumbled upon the oldest Abiogenesis dinosaur ever found, frozen in stone, it looked at it as a gaze, it has done stone as if had gazed upon Medusa. This notosaur took 2 weeks to excavate. And matter of fact, when they were excavating it, the harness from the, I think it was some kind of either burlap or something material that didn't support it broke. And that's why you see the cracks in the shells there. That's why it basically fractured, but it fractured in equal parts. So that's why they were able to put it back together again. But it took 2 weeks to do it, and it ended up still being 3,000 pounds of rock. Every article that I've seen refers to this as rock. I don't know why you'd be drilling through sand. So when it says right here that it's a 2,500 pound mass or 3,000 pound mass of stone in the corner of this museum, then when I told you that this was stone and you said I was lying, do you wish to retract that?
No, I can pull up an article where they said they were drilling through sand and they hit the notosaur if you want me to.
Well, that's let's say for arguendo. Let's say for arguendo, that's true. Is this not stone? Is that not a base of stone? That's clearly in a stone.
Do you believe?
Are you sure that the article? Are you sure that the article said sand and not sandstone?
Yeah, I'm thinking sandstone.
Because do you believe that this notosaur was buried in concrete? concrete, mixed it, and threw it in a concrete block, and then he was putting the water like that. Well, this stone could have formed long
Send us
after
the
it
link,
was dead.
George.
And
Send us the link.
That's not how fossilization and deposition.
Yeah, not even remotely. Yeah, it was actually in soft sandstone. So that is stone. A sandstone is a type of rock. There's a 100-million-year-old fossil of sandstone. So again, do you want to apologize because sandstone is a type of rock?
I'm looking it up.
He's going to send the article.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes a lot more sense to drill through sandstone than through sand, because if you're drilling through sand, you're going to get sand in the gears. You could just dig it. There's no need for a drill. You use a drill for solid materials like rocks.
Or couldn't it be under like a layer of sand also? And maybe the drill, when you say it hit something,
It could be bedrock or something.
Actual rock, that fossil.
Okay, I'm going to read it to you. It's you want me to send you the link?
Yeah,
it's from Discovery Channel.
Okay.
Discovery Magazine, rather. Okay, I'll read it first, and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It says, in the afternoon of March 21st, 2011, a heavy equipment operator named Sean Funk was carving his way through the earth, unaware that he would soon meet a dragon. That Monday had started like any other at the Millennium Mine, a vast pit some 17 miles north of Fort McMurray, Alberta, operated by energy company Suncor. Hour after hour, Funk's towering excavator gobbled its way down to sands laced with bitumen, the transformigrified remains of marine plants and creatures that lived and died more than 110 million years ago. It was the only ancient life he regularly saw. In 12 years of digging, he had stumbled across fossilized wood and the occasional petrified tree stump, but never the remains of an animal, and certainly no dinosaurs. But around 1:30, Funk's bucket clipped something much harder than the surrounding rock. So I guess it was some kind of soft rock, but
surrounding
it was much
rock.
harder than. Okay. But it says, yes, but he also says his excavator gobbled its way down to sands laced with bitumen. So what were you telling me, that this petrified thing was layered in
George,
a sheet
it's going to be
of
a lot
rock?
better just to say that you read it wrong.
Yeah, it's still rock, George.
We don't have to dance around it. You know what I mean? Like you just misspoke.
Well, you see, I'm asking you a question here. Do you believe it was buried in a concrete block?
Why would I believe that, George? Concrete is a modern thing.
If on the one hand he's saying he's drilling through sand, and on the other hand he hit rock.
Wait, George, this is 110 million years old. Did they have concrete 110 million years ago?
I'm telling you, on the one hand, that you read that I said he's gobbling down its way to sands laced with bitumen. Okay, so that's what I'm reading here. He's drilling through sands.
Bitumen's a type of hydrocarbons. That's basically all.
He's drilling through sands, and then he hit a rock, which is I believe it's the dinosaur
byproduct
himself.
Of petroleum drilling. Sorry.
Okay, well, I believe he's talking about the rock itself being a dinosaur. You know, I don't think it's like he's talking about.
It was found in rock. It is petrified, meaning that is pretty much made of rock. There's permanent mineralization or full mineralization. You know what happens when something goes fossilized? The organics are gone. It's being replaced by minerals. That's what fossilization basically is. So it's no longer an organic animal at that point. It's basically a rock that has been formed in the shape of that dinosaur. There's no organic left, except for very small traces occasionally, like you had mentioned earlier about Dr. Schweitzer's work. She's found things like some kinds of proteins, like collagen. There's no blood she found, by the way. You misspoke on that one, but she did find collagen, but in very, very small amounts, and that was actually in the fossilized rock that she had to soak it in for 3 days in an acid bath. So this is all rock there. It's all minerals. There's nothing organic.
Where was this found? Steve, where was this found? Or George, maybe you're looking at it.
Alberta. Off the coast of Alberta, Canada.
Off the coast, then. So probably you are drilling through sand to get to the layer that that particular fossil is in. I don't think that it's saying the sand's like.
Well, he said he's drilling through sand, and then he hit rock, and then I don't know the rock is the dinosaur or the surrounding rock surrounding the dinosaur.
Guys, I just looked up.
Hold on 1 second.
I just looked up bitumen sand, and it turns out that this is an oil sand. These are tar sands. So
bitumen
what
is
you're
the
looking at
residue after you're done producing oil.
Yeah. Yes, this is not like sand at the beach. If you look at photos of the stuff, this is definitely not sand. Like look up vitamin sand on Google Images, and you'll see this does look like something you would drill through.
Is it black?
Yeah, it's black and it looks like crap.
Yeah, let me see.
Like the texture
Yeah.
looks like shit.
Yeah, it's a black type of.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, it's oily rock is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, George, that's not the kind of sand that you're thinking of. Definitely not.
Okay.
You have to drill through some of
okay.
that stuff. It's hard.
All right, Steve, now that we've got those 2 points out of the way, let's see if there's any questions in the live chat. And by the way, guys, Steve will be having an after show in an hour after we close here. As always, both of you guys are invited to join, and we'll get the links out later on. Go ahead,
And in
Steve.
between there, Shannon Q is going to be having a hangout too, by the way, that I'm going to be a part of. So, okay, live feed. If you want to ask questions, ask them now. What's that?
I'll be part of that as well.
Awesome.
I said yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna scour the live chat for questions here. So far, I'm not really finding anything. We have 500 people, no questions. Come on, you got to have some questions here.
Well, that means that they did a good job of stating their cases. Then it's no issue. Remember, guys, tomorrow we have Brian Forrester that's gonna come. And I tell you what we'll do. Let's go ahead and play Mr. Atheist PSA while Steve double checks and make sure that we didn't miss any questions. And then when we come back, we'll ask those. And if not, we will wrap up and see you guys for the after show. Okay, Steve, were there anything we need to ask?
Well, one person asked, what would it take to kind of change your position, which I think you kind of answered, but maybe go elucidate a little bit more, because George, what you're asking for, I think you need to kind of rethink your position a little bit, because you're asking for what's called an argument from ignorance, that you're saying you're going to hold your position until it's proven otherwise. That's a fallacy. So what would it take for you to actually be, not so much the position of God, but you change your position on science, because you've got a lot of the sciences wrong, all the way from the physics to the biology is just wrong. What would it take to change your position the way you're going to actually learn the science correctly, like King Crocoduck actually went to school to learn science? What would it take for you to do that? Somebody asked a question on those lines.
Verifiable science. And what would it take to change your position to believe in God? I could ask you the same question, atheists.
We can answer that atheist for him to manifest himself.
Anyone who's an atheist or agnostic or whatever, what would it take to change your position to believing in the God of the Scriptures as?
Yeah, I'm okay with evidence. I mean,
if he was real, he would know.
That's the argument that I use as well. George, you asked a question. Can we answer?
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm a non-evidentialist. I don't particularly believe in verificationism. I don't think that you have to have physical evidence to support a belief. Okay, so I'm not one of those people out there saying you must demonstrate God exists to be a believer in God. I think that's kind of an absurd position. However, I do agree with Kyle on the fact that if God is omnipotent, and if you go from the argument from divine hiddenness, me being an agnostic, non-resistant, non-believer, he would know what it would take. So at that point, it wouldn't be really up to me, because I don't decide my beliefs. I don't wake up and say, I choose to believe X, or I choose to believe in God. Those are things that are beyond my control. Beliefs choose me for all practical purposes. So if God wanted me to have that belief, it would be kind of up to him to make me have that belief. He would know what it would take. And I think that's a much more acceptable answer than saying, demonstrate. That's from my perspective.
King, how would you answer that?
I like Steve's answer, so I'm going to go with that as well.
Okay.
You're a smart man. All right, let's see what other questions we got here.
Okay, can I respond to that?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
I would like to say that I have faith in God, and I don't have faith in some of the science that is presented that refutes my positions on God. And when I am satisfied that I'm absolutely sure that the science that refutes my positions, as we heard during this debate or discussion, I have certain positions. King Crocoduck has other positions. You guys have other positions, and we all have to see the evidence for ourselves and believe what we want to believe out of it, out through our own interpretation of it. So my interpretation currently is I have faith in God. I believe in the old earth creationism as I laid out. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth billions of years ago. About 6,000 years ago, I become a young earth creationist. From that point on, he created life and formed the earth. That's it. So I don't believe that he created one cat. I believe he probably created a few different kinds of, or different types of kinds of cats, that kind of thing. But, these variation, I don't have all the answers, so I don't know everything. That's my position.
There is some problems though, and a couple questions I'm going to lump into one thing, because you were talking about science, and you said something before, like benefit. There's no beneficial mutations, and that we know is an objectively false statement. There are objective facts out there, and we're going to be talking about this on Shannon's channel. King Crocoduck and I have talked about objective facts. There are beneficial mutations. The CCR5 Delta 32 is a beneficial mutation that even Creation.com on their own creationist webpage says is a beneficial mutation. Dr. Jonathan Safadi agrees is a beneficial mutation. Things like lactase persistence is a beneficial mutation. They do exist. They're not as common as deleterious ones. Most mutations are neutral, but it's just that there are such things as facts out there, and their facts are there are beneficial mutations. So the question is, do you accept the scientific facts as facts because they are verifiable?
I don't know what the C532 beneficial mutation is. If you could give it to me in layman's terms. And Darwin said that to believe that the human eyeball is a construct of beneficial mutation after mutation is something that he doesn't even had a hard time believing.
Darwin didn't even know what genes were.
Go ahead, King.
Yeah. He did not know what the genes were, but this is a quote mine. I'll pull up the full quote right now.
Let me just do this real quick while you get the quote mine, because we know this is a quote mine and we know the rest of the story on it. But he asked the question: the Delta 32 CCR Delta 32 mutation infers a resistance to HIV. So it's a very for people, so it's a very beneficial mutation. So, but the eye has nothing to do with anything whatsoever. But this is a
hold on, George. He's going to read the quote.
Yeah.
He's going to read.
He's going to explain to you why this is a well-known quote mine.
I'm pulling it up. Give me a second.
Oh, okay, gotcha. And remember, guys, to join King and Steve on Shannon's channel after we get done here, and then George and King, you're okay. Go ahead.
All right. So here's the full quote. First of quote mine. To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. And this is where most creationists stop. But it continues. Yet reason tells me that if numerous gradations from a perfect and complex eye to one very imperfect and simple, each grade being useful to its possessor, can be shown to exist, if further the eye does vary ever so slightly, and the variations be inherited, which is certainly the case, and if any variation or modification in the organ ever be useful to an animal under changing conditions of life, then the difficulty of believing that a perfect and complex eye could be formed by natural selection, though inseparable by our imagination, can hardly be considered real. How a nerve comes to be more sensitive to light hardly concerns us more than how life itself first originated. But I may remark that several facts make me suspect that any sensitive nerve may be rendered sensitive to light, and likewise to those coarser vibrations of the air which produce sound. And he continues from there with 3 more pages describing a sequence of plausible intermediate stages between eyelessness and human eyes, and giving examples from existing organisms to show that the intermediates are viable.
George?
Yeah, and
very well. You think that Darwin was trying to explain a paradox that he had a problem with, but he did the best he could. And as for
actually, that's wrong, George. That's wrong. Before you get to CCR, what Darwin did was he would say something along the lines of, this is hard to grasp. This is hard to explain. This, we don't know why. But you know what? Let me explain to you this. And then he proceeded to explain the evolution of the eye exceptionally well. If you read the book, he does a great job in explaining these things. But he starts off by saying,
I don't know how you can go from blindness and no eyeballs to a progression of eyeballs, but that's
Because
I heard it.
the first eyes were not eyeballs. They were photosensitive pieces of cells that were on skin, usually of like a flatworm. They weren't of an eyeball. Then they got concavity. Then they got a lens. They evolved over a period of time.
The problem with that theory is the problem with all evolution like this is the bacteria. I suppose that is the CC532. That's bacteria.
No.
What is that? What is resistant to HIV? What?
It's a gene. It's a gene that confers. It's a beneficial mutation.
Okay. Well, again, that is the beneficial mutation I'm speaking about is being able to go from a crocodile to a duck. We don't see that kind of mutation. not.
We clearly have one here, George. George, we have one here.
King Crocodile's right here. Yeah. This is what I'm saying, George. Nobody in their right mind would ever suggest a crocoduck exist.
That's an artistic
No,
drawing.
listen, George. No one in their right mind would ever suggest a frog would ever population would ever develop into humans, or that an alligator would over time have. No, he did not. No, he did not. I guarantee it.
Our common ancestor was a one cell single organism. Explained. If you go back billions of years,
George, let me clarify again, because you're not understanding. Nobody suggests that a population of crocodiles can produce a population of ducks. Nobody suggests that pine trees and elephants can mate together. Nobody besides people like you and Ken Hovind. That's it. There's no person in the world. There's no scientist in the world that advocates for any of these things.
Okay.
That's why.
George, this was good. We ended with you smiling there a second ago. I saw you smile. See, look, this ended a lot better than.
I just want to congratulate you. You have just affirmed the creation account. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Well, believe what you wish. Yeah, cool.
Cool.
Hey,
right,
George,
let me know.
Go ahead, King Crocoduck.
Could you look up Richard Sandrak really quick for me?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, George. Richard Sandrak on Google.
I don't even know who that is. Do I know this person?
How do you spell his last name? S-A-N?
Sandrak.
Oh, I have seen this kid before. This is the guy that had.
Hold on, Steve. He's trying to spell it real quick. Hold on 1 second. Go ahead and spell it again.
Sandrak.
Yeah, he's the one with the mutation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So this kid was a bodybuilder since he was a little kid, and there's a famous picture of him doing a one-handed push-up when he's like 3 years old or something. And you can look at images of him growing up. This kid is super muscular. Would you consider this a beneficial mutation?
No.
Just look at images of him.
He looks like he grew up. He doesn't look like a normal guy now. He doesn't look like he's that little kid. And besides, what did he mutate to? He just has what was in his gene pool already. It doesn't have any other type of muscles.
That's not what it means. That's not what mutation means. You're thinking of mutagens. You're thinking of a mutation.
No, you're thinking of X-Men. Thinking of X-Men.
Like X-Men, yeah, that's what you're thinking of. And that's not the same thing.
What was the mutation? What was the mutation of the boy? What was it?
Hang on.
Muscle.
George, a mutation is a change of the nucleotide sequence in the gene, resulting in a different protein being produced. That's a mutation, like a point mutation. It means that one of the ATGCs or Gs have changed into something else. Or actually, it'd be two, but you basically the base pair has
less
changed.
scientific. Okay. I'm going to answer that, George. He could do one-arm push-ups at 3 years old.
He was strong. I'm sure there was probably someone else born in the history of the world that could do one-arm push-ups at 3 years old.
Then they had that mutation.
But that's the result of.
What mutation? He's a human being. He didn't mutate into anything else but
a genetic mutation.
Hold on, King. King, explain
George,
that, please.
A genetic mutation. A genetic mutation is just a change in the nucleotide sequence. You change the sequence of the DNA. Even one could potentially be sufficient. It's usually not one in order to cause this kind of something this drastic. But in his case, whatever particular genes resulted from these nucleotide changes, different amino acids, different proteins started being produced in different concentrations than what's normal.
Well, what happened to him?
He doesn't actually. No, you don't actually change, George. That's where you're missing it. You don't actually.
No, I know that. I hear what you're saying.
Doesn't mean that you
What happened to him?
reform into like an X-Man.
He doesn't look like he maintained that mutation. He looks like a normal guy now.
You know,
walking on the beach there.
His DNA didn't change over the course of his life. His DNA, whatever. Well, yeah.
I don't see anything about this mutation. I see him. He's got a tattoo under his right nipple there, and he's standing on a beach.
You won't see.
What is the mutation?
It's not that you'll be able to see the mutation.
The mutation is
because of the
George.
mutation.
George, you asked the question. Let him answer. George, you asked the question. Let him answer. What's the mutation, King?
Growing up, he had much more muscle mass. He was much stronger. So in an environment where he might have been threatened by somebody, he would have been able to fend for himself better. I would consider that a beneficial mutation.
Absolutely.
Did he maintain that? Because he looks like a normal. I don't know how old is he? Your 25-year-old.
George,
in
you
this picture?
don't lose your DNA. Your DNA is what makes you up. Your DNA can't change, but the mutation is part of who you are. Just like you have blue eyes is due to a mutation. Do you no longer have blue eyes as you grow up?
So you're saying he's still what feat can he do? Is he capable of bench pressing 800 pounds, or what is it? What is the mutation?
Don't mean that you get superpowers, George. They don't mean that you get superpowers.
Yeah, I'm like, sure about that? Because I really would be cool if it was. Yeah, this is, you know what?
I don't see. He looks like a normal human being to me, and I don't understand what you're trying to say. He was born with some kind of mutation. Okay.
Gives you superpowers. This is, whatever.
You're just saying on the one hand, there's no beneficial mutation. And then on the other hand, you're saying he's born with a mutation. Look at him. He looks like a normal guy.
He did one-arm push-ups at 3 years old, George.
George, can he still do them? Because he doesn't look like, and what can he do now?
George, if you're an animal and you're 2 years old and you have that much of fitness to your environment and you are able to have muscular fitness and a predator comes along and you're able to kill that predator and survive later on to reproduce, that is what evolution would dictate. That is a beneficial mutation because the organism survived long enough to reproduce. That's the whole basis behind evolution is reproduction. Okay, that's what an organism wants to do is reproduce. If you die, you don't reproduce. So the benefit was with respect to the environment that he didn't die due to predators. That would be a beneficial mutation. And
maybe he just got lazy growing up. He just got lazy and didn't stick with weight training. I mean, you're not going to see.
Whoa! You just confessed something there. So it wasn't about a mutation. He was weight training.
He was not weight training when he was 3 years old. Come on.
At 3?
I don't know. He was doing one-arm push-ups, so maybe he was. I don't know.
Come on, George.
He got the way that
allowed him to develop bigger muscle mass than normal.
Hold on.
I can give another more clear example. There's an extended Connecticut family whose DNA allowed them to not to basically be immune to osteoporosis. They have very high bone density that makes them basically their bones are basically unbreakable.
Like steel.
I don't know about steel, but
it's pretty. Yeah, I know what you're talking.
Now, what about that, George? Can you see the bones on the picture of this family?
I believe that occurs all the time. I mean, some people get cancer, some people don't. Some, I believe, it's a result of diet. Some is a result of smoking, but some could have the same diet, and one guy's going to get cancer, one guy's not. The guy who has the better genes is going to live longer, but people do die.
But George, we're talking about a mutation that makes it basically almost impossible for their bones to break by conventional means. Whatever could break your bones or my bones or most people's bones are not going to be able to break their bones. Is that not a beneficial mutation?
I take a jackhammer to his wrist and I put it on the table. I guarantee I'm going to break his bone.
George, that's not the point.
I'm done.
George, that's not the point. Yeah, I think we've reached
inanity.
The event horizon. Okay. Yeah, George, that's not the point that he was trying to make. He's trying to make the point that something a change happened in their DNA that allowed for them to have bones that under normal circumstances would break ours, but not theirs. Yes, you could probably break it with a jackhammer.
Okay.
Right.
I got you.
That's a mutation.
And one of the greatest ones was lactase
Still got bones
persistence, or
and still a human being.
ability to drink milk and not have problems drinking milk because we don't produce lactase, a enzyme to break down lactose after a certain age.
I disagree, Steve.
That mutation was one of the best mutations in ever.
Nope.
There's actually 3 different times it happened, but because we can be 10,000 years ago, they could actually use milk from other sources and get a new carbon source. That was a huge evolutionary advantage, and that was a beneficial mutation that it didn't.
Blue eyes
about 10,000
are
years
the
ago.
best.
Blue eyes is good
10,000 years
too.
ago. How do you know 10,000 years ago that mutation happened?
Because we have things called genetics that we actually can study, George, and that you've never.
Let's not go down the rabbit hole anymore. We're getting to a close. Let's not go down the rabbit hole anymore.
I'm just telling you that lactase persistence is a very well-known person. Well,
George,
I'm telling you right now that lactase persistence is a very well-known beneficial mutation that allows the ability to drink milk, because normally your body shuts off your gene expression for lactase after about 2 years of age or so. But this mutation did not stop that gene expression any longer. It kept going, so it still was producing lactase, which is an enzyme that can break down lactose.
Do you like ice cream, George? Do you like ice cream?
You're giving.
George,
yeah, if you like ice cream, it's a beneficial mutation.
Are you giving examples of variations within the humankind? I mean, there's some black people that don't have the ability to break down lactose, from what I understand.
Right,
so,
right, because exactly, and that demonstrates evolution, because their lineage was different from when the actual mutation occurred. There was actually 3 instances.
Human beings aren't changing into another kind of creature. That's the problem that you have.
I don't think we're going to find any.
Supposed to, George.
I don't think we're going to find any common ground. We'll have to do it again.
I agree with you then, and there is some beneficial mutations within a kind of a creature.
Yes,
good.
That way. Yay.
Those types of mutations, yes. Those types.
What'd you say, King?
Those types of mutations.
I just want to ask, George, can you see how it's possible for these mutations to propagate throughout a population and then accumulate over time?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Good.
Yeah, that's
good. See,
that's
this was good.
Yay.
George, I will make sure to send you a my rainbow arrow for the response that you do this time. It'll be a pretty one with glitter and rhinestones. Cool.
I will honor your request.
Oh, sweet. All right. Once again, guys, in probably about an hour, we will be doing the after show for this hangout. And as always, both of you guys will be getting a link to it. You can join if you want to. You don't have to. You can watch. We'll kind of go through some things in a little bit more detail. Those things will be sent to you guys first, so that you can be the first 2 in there. And anybody else, the patrons for Non Sequitur will also get first dibs. Anybody else, just send us a message and we will send out the link in the meantime. Anybody got anything that? Sure.
Yeah, we will be playing Young Earth Creationist Jeopardy. You don't want to miss it. So I'll tell you what, if King Crocoduck and George want to play Young Earth Creationist Jeopardy head to head, I'm okay with that. And this is a good time to ask. I think people that want to become a Patreon for $1 or whatever, this is a good time to do it, because we've earned it this particular hangout, because I'm going to have a drink.
Well, this was much better than last time, though.
Out of alcohol.
This was much better than last time. This was much better than last time. I'm George. I'm surprised. This is a much different hangout than the last one.
That's why I'm inviting him to the after show. Let him play Jeopardy with us. That's fine.
Yeah, but we want to thank you guys for coming on. Okay. Well, hold on, George. I'm gonna give you the chance to close us out. I'm gonna let you guys plug your channels, talk about obviously, George, your ministry, and then we'll end on that note, and we'll see you guys on the after show. So, King Crocoduck, if you want to go ahead and start us out by telling people where they can find you and all that good stuff.
Yeah, just type King Crocoduck into the search bar and subscribe to me. Give me money. Give me shillbucks.
NASA doesn't pay him very well.
And George.
Well, you can find me on scripturetruthministries.com and on YouTube if you want to subscribe. My ministry is not your standard Christian ministry. I'm a messianic minister, and my ministry is dedicated to shattering Christian deceptions, making a straight path for the end time saints on the narrow road, and revealing end times prophecies. Thank you guys for the show.
Sure. Absolutely.
Non sequitur. Non sequitur. Non sequitur. Your facts are uncoordinated.
Darkness comes alive.